the product, initially they would allow the gases that escape from that process to go straight up through the chimneys and out into the airway. Well, in doing the research and EPA regulations and protection regulations, they tested that air and found it to be absolutely toxic, so they said no longer that can be done. So they had to invent a product of capturing, a way of capturing that, and they do it through what's called wet silos. Now what that means is as the process is being refined, it's going through the system, instead of that gas being escaped into the air, it's actually going through what's called a wet chimney. Now through that process, these gases and these toxins are being trapped in water that is collected through the chimney process, and these are funneled off into large storage tanks. Now that product is what they call 25% pure. That product is the product that they then put in a tanker and send to the water facility to put into the waterway. This product is raw, toxin...
Hydrofluorosilicic acid.
It has a name, so it isn't actually fluoride. Fluoride's a made-up name.
This is really important because a lot of people, fluoride's not a scary word, but in fact, what can you say what it is again?
A hydrofluorosilicic acid.
So it is an acid.
It's an acid.
A lot of people don't even realise that much, that fluoride is an acid.
And this acid contains lead, arsenic, mercury, sulfuric acid. Let's put it this way: if that tanker that was on its way from Geelong actually had an accident and spilt, the concentration of that acid would eat straight through a car. It would eat straight through the bitumen. It would eat straight through a human being,
and it would pollute.
And
any
it would
waterways,
permanently toxic
seriously,
any waterway that's within that grass.
So environmentally, it's a big issue as well.
But I mean, people might suggest that you're being alarmist there because apparently the quantities that they use are extremely in our water supplies are quite minute. Can I just put something to you? I was interested to read that. First of all, 90% of the New South Wales population now receives fluoridated water. That came as a big surprise to me. We're going to probably bump it up to 91 or 92% when we come on board. But let me read you something put out by the North Coast Area Health Service, because I'd like to know what you have to say about this.
John Irving, would it?
I'm not sure who it was. They say that the correct concentration of fluoride can reduce the amount of cavities in children's baby teeth by as much as 60%, and in adults' teeth by as much as 35%. I mean, and when you look at figures like that, they're remarkably in favour of the benefits of fluoride. I mean, that's an amazing fact. I mean, if it's true, and it's put out by a health service, one would hope.
Exactly.
And, how do you challenge statistics like that, though?
Tim, I'll really quickly answer this for you.
Okay.
The reality is, in Australia, since fluoride was introduced into this country, there has not been one study done in Australia. None.
No, they're basically only looking retrospectively at statistics, but there was a study that came out, it was only released fairly recently. It was an 18-year study that they actually looked at tooth decay, and they call it decayed, missing, filled index. How many tooth surfaces are decayed, missing or filled, and they looked at children, teenagers, older people. And it was interesting because Queensland's an area that only had 5% fluoridation, mainly in the Townsville area. For all these years, Queensland hasn't been fluoridated, and everybody, the government and Anna Bligh has said, but yeah, that's why we have the worst teeth ever. But the studies came out even before Anna Bligh actually made that comment, and they showed that Queensland didn't have the worst teeth. In fact, in different areas, Tasmania had the highest level of toothlessness, and Tasmania's been fluoridated the longest. Beaconsfield in Tasmania was the first place to be fluoridated. I'd say in one of the groups, I can't remember the actual group, Victorians were pretty bad. They've also been fluoridated for a long time. New South Wales came up there as bad, and Queensland weren't the worst. They didn't have the worst figures, and so that blows that out of the water. So wherever they're getting those statistics from, they're skewed, they're false. That's all I can say. And you know, since when do we believe our health department was on the right track and doing the right thing?
Well, can I put some more literature to you? This is more literature from the North Coast Health Service. I tried to get the closest one to us as possible. They say that fluoride, it does read like an ad, I have to admit. It does read like an ad, but I'll quote what they've got, the information that they have. Fluoride is like a constant dental repair kit for your teeth. It helps reduce the amount of acid damage, and it can in fact repair some damage in your teeth before it can become permanent.
Oh my God.
True or not?
That's false. But, you know, the whole idea of how fluoride works, and I came out of dental school knowing and understanding and being taught that fluoride has a topical effect. Topical means you put it on the area that it's required. You know, there's a good saying, you know, you don't drink your sunscreen, you put it on the skin. You put the fluoride on the teeth if that's what you're trying to if that's what you're trying to achieve, and you don't swallow it. But I mean, you know, firstly, that's if you have any idea of how dentists believe that fluoride works, and the dental researchers that believe fluoride works, they believe it works topically, not systemically.
There's another question I have to ask you. You're basically saying the information, the two things that I've quoted there from the North Coast Health Service are false.
Yes.
How do you think they're getting away with it if it's false? I mean, this is information readily available to the public.
We'll give you an example.
Because I just quoted information that's readily available to the public too, and that did not agree with their statistics.
So there's contradicting studies.
You can pull statistics out of anywhere, and if you don't look for it, you won't find it. You know, that's how it goes with scientific research. For years, dentists have said, show me the research. And we're saying, the research is there, I'll tell you where it is, but they don't want to look at it. And I'll tell you, there's a website right now, if there's any dentists or doctors or any health professionals out there that are unsure or genuinely want to know more, there's great health effects of fluoride database at fluoridealert.org. If you go there, there are so many studies that have been done on fluoride and IQ, fluoride and bone disease, fluoride and so many different issues.
Well, I'm going to let you tell me about those problems that are associated with fluoride in a moment, but just on the issue of studies and statistics, there are a lot of them with regards to fluoride. I saw a lot of them myself while I was researching this, and quite a few seem to contradict each other, as you say. But there was one which I thought carried quite a lot of weight, because it actually reviewed the findings of 214 worldwide studies, and it collated the information from 214 studies. It was carried out by the University of York's National Health Service Centre in England in the year 2000. Now, after they looked at these 204...
You're talking about the York Review?
Yeah. After they looked at these 214 studies and evaluated the findings of all of those studies, their conclusion, and it's important that I read this out, their conclusion was that fluoridated water did indeed protect against tooth decay, and that it had no adverse effects aside from, as what you've already mentioned, dental fluorosis in some people. So the question I'm trying to ask you here is, it must be difficult for you to battle or wage a campaign against fluoride when respected institutes are contradicting parts of what you have to say.
Yeah, well, an example of how respected institutes can contradict themselves is there was quite an important study done by a researcher at Harvard University who found that there was a risk of osteosarcoma, a serious bone cancer, in young boys who were exposed to water fluoridation. Now, that was a study that she finished the study, she actually got it published, and then it was basically retracted because it turned out that her supervisor, he pulled the study, but it turned out after a lot of, there was a lot of hoo-ha over it, and people were just flabbergasted that they could cover this study up, but it turned out that her supervisor was a consultant for Colgate-Palmolive.
Oh, okay.
So Colgate, another company that likes fluoride in its toothpaste. So, you know, this goes on everywhere. There's lots of studies that have been suppressed or ignored, not published. Do
you think a lot of that goes on where people are actually in cahoots with companies that are making money from this, and
of course,
perhaps even medical specialists and dentists?
How do you think medical and research? How do you think people get the money for medical research? It comes from the companies that are going to make the money out of whatever it is they're researching.
But we've actually even had dentists say to us that they would not go against what fluoride is and what they believe it to be for the fear of backlash. they've actually come out and said things like that, where they really don't want to make comment. They understand, the pros and the cons. But again, when you come down to the question, what is fluoride that they're putting in the water, we've got to really, really be clear that the product that a dentist use is not the same product that is going into the water.
You're implying that it's a chemical, yeah? Fluoride.
Definitely. Yeah.
But I mean, isn't fluoride, to my understanding, and I'm not an expert at this at all, and that's why you guys are here, but I thought that fluoride was actually a mineral, which occurred naturally.
No, fluorine. Fluorine is a gas, a highly toxic gas that occurs naturally.
In a very, very,
water.
very small
Fluoride compounds occur naturally, as in calcium fluoride, in very low amounts.
Right.